Ephesus, the jewel of Asia Minor, a city crowned with wealth, power, and the great temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the ancient world. But today, the marble streets tremble, not with trade, not with celebration, but with fury. An angry mob surges like a storm through the marketplace, fists raised, voices shouting. The city is shaken by rage. And in the very heart of the chaos, pushed, jostled, accused, stands one man. Aristarchus of Thessalonica, a loyal disciple of the way, a faithful companion of the Apostle Paul. Though surrounded by threats, he does not falter. For Aristarchus knows his calling is not comfort nor safety, but faithfulness, to stand firm beside Paul, even in the face of danger. This is his story. Thessalonica, capital of Macedonia, a thriving city of wealth, influence, and ambition. Upon the great Via Egnatia, the Roman road and artery, from the Adriatic Sea in the west to the Aegean in the east, a crossroads of cultures, commerce, and ideas, where merchants, travelers, and soldiers from every corner of the empire would. Here, in this bustling city, the story of faith and struggle would take root. Aristarchus chose to follow. He left behind the security of Thessalonica, its thriving markets, its wealth, its familiar comforts. The laughter of friends, the rhythms of home, the steady pull of a city built on trade and ambition. He turned from the life he knew and stepped onto the unpredictable road of the gospel. It was not an easy road. It was a path marked with uncertainty, with hardship, with danger at every turn. But Aristarchus was not alone. He walked beside Paul through the bustling streets of Ephesus, where the shadow of Artemis's temple towered above the crowds. Across the rugged roads of Macedonia, where the Roman legions marched and merchants carried their goods, and on the restless waters of the Mediterranean, where storms threatened to break both ship and spirit. He heard the shouts of angry crowds. He felt the push of violent hands. He saw the walls of prison cells close around him. And still Aristarchus did not turn back, for he believed. He believed that the message of Christ was worth more than silver and gold, worth more than comfort and safety, worth even more than his very life. Through storms, through riots, through chains, he remained steadfast, unwavering, faithful. And in the quiet strength of Aristarchus, we glimpse the courage of a disciple, one who chose the narrow road, one who bore the cost, one who walked not for his own glory, but for the glory of Christ, to the very end. The mob could have beaten him to death. Their fury was unrelenting, their shouts deafening. But God's providence and the firm hand of the city officials kept the blood from spilling that day. In the chaos, life was spared. That day sealed Aristarchus's place, not just in Paul's ministry, but in his heart. Through the danger, Paul saw more than a companion. He saw a brother willing to risk everything, his reputation, his safety, even his very life for the sake of Christ and for the fellowship of the gospel. Aristarchus was no mere bystander in the story of the early church. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Paul, enduring the same storms, facing the same angry crowds, sharing the same chains. What began in Thessalonica grew into a bond that could not be broken. Together, they would carry the good news of Jesus Christ into cities darkened by idols and into hearts longing for truth. When Paul appealed to Caesar, Aristarchus did the unthinkable. He volunteered to travel with him, not as a free man, but as a fellow prisoner. It was a choice few could imagine. The road to Rome was long and perilous, the sentence uncertain, and the empire's judgment often cruel. Yet Aristarchus knew where God had called him, not to comfort, but to costly loyalty. On the crowded ship bound for Italy, he shared Paul's chains. When storms battered the vessel, he held fast to the same hope. When the sea threatened to swallow them whole, he clung to the same promise, that the Lord who had begun the journey would carry them safely to its end. To stand with Paul meant to suffer with Paul, and Aristarchus, once again, chose to stand. In Rome, Paul lived under house arrest, and Aristarchus, he stayed close, sharing in the work, guarding the door, encouraging the saints. Day after day, the rented house became a beacon. Visitors came, curious, questioning, sometimes desperate. And while Paul preached and dictated letters that would shape the faith for centuries, Aristarchus stood faithfully by. He was the quiet strength behind the apostle, answering knocks at the door, welcoming strangers, making sure the needs of the household were met. When Paul's body grew weary, Aristarchus lifted his burdens. When Paul's spirit was heavy, Aristarchus lifted his eyes toward Christ. Chains could not silence the gospel, and prison walls could not contain the fellowship of believers. Together, they turned a place of captivity into a sanctuary of hope. And though history records Paul's words more than Aristarchus's deeds, the gospel's advance in Rome bears the fingerprints of a faithful companion whose presence was as steady as the love of God itself. The world will forget many names. Empires rise and fall. Cities once shining with marble and gold crumble into dust. Even the mighty temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the ancient world, lies in ruins today. But heaven remembers. Heaven remembers those who stood firm when others turned away. Men and women whose names may never appear in history books, yet whose faith is written in the Lamb's book of life. Aristarchus was one of them. He was not the loudest voice, nor the most celebrated leader, but he was steadfast. He endured beatings, mobs, storms, and chains, all for the sake of Christ. And when others abandoned Paul, Aristarchus stayed. He chose faith over fear, loyalty over comfort. And in the courts of heaven, that faith is not forgotten. For the true measure of greatness is not found in the monuments of men, but in the quiet, unwavering devotion of those who stand firm to the very end.